Let me read to you a passage from the Gospel of St. John, chapter 1, verse 1 to 18. It's the Gospel for the second Sunday after Christmas. St. John writes, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify concerning that light, so that through him all might believe. He himself was not the light. He came only as a witness to the light. The true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. Yet to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the power to become children of God, children born not of natural descent, nor of human decision, or a husband's will, but born of God. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. John testified concerning him. He cried out, saying, 'This is the one I spoke about when I said, He who comes after me has surpassed me, because he was before me.' Out of his fullness we have all received grace upon grace. For the law was given through Moses. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God. The only Son who is in the bosom of the Father, he has made him known." That's from John chapter 1, verse 1 to 18. The Gospel for the second Sunday after Christmas. We are led to think of the light of all mankind. The light. You know, Socrates was renowned for his dependence on reasoning, subjecting all comers to its searching scrutiny. He also showed many of the signs of being a spiritual person. He would often spend time in meditation, and sometimes would go into trances where he did not move for hours. We read that in the Symposium. He received messages in his dreams, and he followed these messages, as we read in Crito, in the Apology, and in Phaedo. The most famous of his spiritual characteristics, however, was his messages from his daimonion, or divine sign. In Plato's Apology, Socrates said that this divine or spiritual sign was a sort of voice that had come to him since childhood. He also said this voice, when it acts, tells him not to do something he is thinking of doing, but never tells him positively to do something. And this related, it seems, to matters beyond the scope of his reason. Whether this account of Plato's ought be accepted at face value is another matter, but I see no reason to deny it may have been an authentic religious experience. The extent of Socrates' trust in his daimonion's guidance is revealed when he faced death. It did not warn him against it. So death must not be an evil thing, he concluded. For all his life of rational discussion with those whom he met and conversed in Athens, Socrates was a man of piety, especially towards his perceived daimonion, or divine voice. In view of Socrates' life and mission, which included not only his influence in Athens, but his influence on Plato and Aristotle and their legacy, God may have been according him a special guidance from time to time over and above the distinctive natural gifts that he had given him. God may have been providing a special light to a pagan, a man of piety, and a religious guide to many others. The upshot was an altogether impressive man. We read in Plato's Crito how at the end of their conversation, Socrates says to Crito, "Leave me then, Crito, to fulfill the will of God and to follow whither he leads." And this, despite the fact that Socrates perceived this to involve the duty to administer to himself the suicidal potion from the state for his execution. So here we have a man renowned for his pagan insight, his natural goodness, his rationality, and his piety, and favoured perhaps with an occasional light from heaven in some form. This guided him to a better life, however Socrates may have interpreted this. St. John in his prologue tells us that in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The word about which John begins his gospel was the life and light of all mankind. So we have identified for us here the light of all mankind. It is the Word of God, with God from the beginning, which is to say, from all eternity. This Word is the full eternal expression of God's knowledge, both of himself and of everything that is. He is the light that is of and in God. He is the source of whatever true light that is in man. Socrates was renowned for his moral rationality. He has been considered as one of the most remarkable figures in history, with a tremendous influence on Western civilization. As a precursor of Plato and Aristotle, he established, we might say, the spirit of reason, the desire to see things as they are and to follow the argument where it leads. As said, he was also favoured, according to his own account, as reported by Plato, with some special divine assistance. Well, St. John in his prologue informs us that whatever positive light this might have entailed had its origin in the Word, the light of all mankind. The action of the Word is traced in the Hebrew Scriptures prior to the Word becoming flesh. It is the source of life and created reality. God spoke, and it was so, as we read in Genesis chapter 1. It is the source of light and understanding. To prophet after prophet, the word of God came so that the people might understand, and obeying might have life rather than death. The word of God, who is the source of all, was so important in salvation history, and the history of the world was now becoming flesh. For all that is truly light, he surpassed Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, as well as all inspired prophets beyond imagining. The glory of it all was that the Word became man in order to unite himself to every man. There would be a clear way to partake of his light, that light which is the life of every man. It would be by becoming his disciple. And all the nations were to be called to be his disciples. All authority has been given to me, he said, after he had risen from the dead. Go therefore and make disciples of all the nations. Matthew chapter 28, verse 19, we read. It is a truly wonderful thing that we have been granted the means for mankind and each individual to be delivered from the darkness of error and sin and placed in the kingdom of light. This is what is on offer for all. And so the most humble person, in talent far behind such persons as Socrates and Plato, or Moses, Samuel and Elijah, may live in the light. This light was in stupendous abundance for humble and holy Mary and Joseph. This was because they received the word into their lives and hearts wholeheartedly when it was offered to them. It is offered to each of us through the ministry of the church. Let us receive wholeheartedly the Word who is made flesh and live accordingly. In this way, our house will be built on rock.